A few months ago, I got the chance to go down to LA to work for one of the biggest YouTubers in the world, Airrack.
Join the mafia.
Big mother. God damn.
Now, if you don't know who Airrack is, he's amassed over 17.2 million subscribers. He's worked with people like Kai Cenat, Dude Perfect, Mr. Beast, Logan Paul, KSI, Ryan Trahan, every single other YouTuber you can imagine he's collaborated with on challenges, pranks, vlogs, trolling videos, etc. And I was working in the field, in the editing team down in LA on some of the biggest YouTube videos that he's posted recently on his channel. Videos that have hit #1 trending in the world on the YouTube trending page, as well as videos that have amassed millions of views at this point. And with little to no prior experience working for big YouTubers like this, I wanted to share my experience on how I actually got the job, how it all unfolded, and my experience coming out of this. So earlier this year in July, I got a text from my friend, and he told me he actually got reached out to by one of Airrack's producers and hiring managers because they somehow found him from his YouTube channel. My friend actually posted a lot of similar videos to Airrack on his channel, and they wanted him to work for the team, but since he was tackling a bunch of other freelance projects, he declined the position. But he let them know about me and also the editing stuff that I do, and told them to reach out to me if they wanted to fill that position. So a couple weeks go by, I didn't really hear anything. I wasn't really thinking too much of it until my friend actually sent me a DM showing me that Airrack was actually posting about hosting this editing contest. So Airrack actually was hosting this big editing competition where he was looking for the best editor around the world, and they would be coming to LA to work for Airrack for this full-time salary of $100K, and also they would win like $2,000 in cash. So I decided to enter and give it my best shot. I had around 5 or 6 days to submit my video, and what I had to do was actually cut down this example footage of this Renaissance fair that they went to and try to tell a story through that, doing my own voiceovers, doing the music and stuff and sound effects, finding the right tracks for it. So with a couple hours left of the submission, I submitted my video after spending, I think, like 18 hours on the video working on it, and I didn't really think too much of it. I didn't hear anything for like 2 weeks after that, so I was just kind of thinking they already filled the position, and all of a sudden I got a DM from Airrack and this guy named Jason, who is his right-hand man for hiring as well as doing managerial stuff. So Jason, Airrack, and I were in a group chat on Instagram, and they reached out basically saying they loved my submission, but they hired already for the first initial spot, and they already picked a winner for that, but they loved my submission out of all the other hundreds of submissions that they had. I think they had like over 1,000 submissions, but they liked mine a lot based on the intro. They said it was really compelling and kind of told a story. So they were really kind of hooked from that, and they wanted me to actually re-edit the video a little bit more on the Airrack brand style based on their feedback. And if they liked it from there, they would actually open up another position for me to be able to actually work for Airrack's team. So I was like, okay, I still have another shot at this. They gave me a second chance at this video, and with not really having much experience on editing big YouTuber stuff, and also this is totally out of the scope of what I was used to editing when I was first doing this, I was like, all right, I'll just give it my best shot again. And I spent, I think, another like 8 or so hours doing some revisions they told me, and I submitted the video, and they basically offered me the position from there. So they were like, oh, we love the video and we want to bring you down to LA. So that was the next step. I was like, oh wow, this is actually turning into something real. I was surprised, and it was totally unexpected that I was able to actually get this position, and it was sort of strange at the same time. They opened this position just for myself, and I didn't think too much of it, but now looking back, it was a little bit strange they opened this position extra on top of the one they were hiring for, because initially they were only looking for one editor to join the team, but they kind of opened this new position just for myself to see if they can bring on one other person extra onto the team. So I was like, all right, cool. I guess they have a lot of people they're bringing on, they want to hire. So I'm grateful for this opportunity. Let me come down to LA and check out the sites out there, see if there's an Airbnb I can rent or maybe like an apartment, and see what I can do. And what they told me over the phone, I got a call from the HR manager. He said they're going to put me on a trial. So 1 month trial, basically for 30 days. I'd be working in LA at a reduced rate. So it wasn't the 100K salary. It was like a reduced flat rate that I was being paid for. So I agreed to the 1 month trial just to see how it was. And also it would give me experience too, to be able to see how I mesh with the rest of the team, if they get along with me and stuff and everything, and kind of how I fit into the whole operation going on. So this 1 month trial was good for both of us. It allowed us to see kind of if I liked it myself, if I liked the role, and also if they liked me as well. My family and I, we drove down to LA and we looked for an Airbnb. We looked up online, did some research, and unfortunately, while people were advertising that this Airbnb was less than 5 minutes away from where the office was in North Hollywood, when we actually went there in person, with traffic, it was more like 35 to 40 minutes. So a lot of the research that we did was kind of scrapped out because everything that we selected was actually way too far from the office, especially with LA traffic. With little luck on finding a place for a month, especially with the prices they were charging as well, they were charging around $4K for 1 month in North Hollywood, which is pretty crazy. And also the apartments too that were pretty close by. I couldn't do that because they wanted a 13-month lease, and I didn't know if I was going to stay more than a month. So I didn't want to sign an apartment. I didn't want to have an unfurnished place where there's nothing there. I needed something that would already have furniture, a stove at least, and also a fridge and freezer too to hold my groceries too. So unfortunately, we didn't find a place and we were losing hope. And the last place that we had on our list, we were like, if this place doesn't work, we're going home. We're telling the guy we can't do this because we can't find a place to stay for a month. So we were ready to actually just basically say, unfortunately, we can't accept the position. But our last hope, our last house we checked out was actually perfect. It was less than like 2 blocks away from the office. It was easily walkable, like maybe a 10 to 15 minute walk and more like a 5-minute drive. So it was actually in a perfect location, and it was also within our price range too. Now we were actually ready to book the place, and unfortunately the lady told us that the price is actually different. So we called her and she told us the price is actually different than the one we viewed. So she showed us a place that was different than the one we saw online that we were requesting the price for. So she kind of did a bait and switch on us, and we were like, I thought the price was $3,500. And she was like, no, that's the studio one. We didn't see the studio one. We saw the 1-bedroom one, and the studio one wasn't available. So the 1-bedroom one was even more expensive, and that was the one that we ended up touring in person, but that wasn't the same one that we saw online. So she kind of did a bait and switch on that one, and she said that was going to be around like $3,900. So that was pretty pricey, and unfortunately we didn't have any other options. So we decided to go with that one and pay her for the 1 month. Since I was only going to be down there for a month at least, I wanted to see if it was worth it to be in LA or not. And if they decided to bring me on, then I would be working for them full time. I would need to find an apartment or something because it was too expensive to stay in an Airbnb. Now, I actually emailed the HR guy hoping for a guarantee that they would tell me a decision on whether or not they wanted to bring me on within 2 weeks, because at that point, I felt like they already would know if I gelled with the team and kind of would get a sense of who I am at that point. I would also have more reassurance too, because you need some time to be able to get an apartment in LA. You can't just pick it up right on the spot and have an apartment if there's no availability. So I have to make sure that there's availability for an apartment, and I'd have adequate time to get my furniture and stuff from where I'm living to move down to LA if I was working for Airrack full time. Unfortunately, they couldn't give me a guarantee. They told me they'd tell me within 2 weeks, and I was like, all right, it's kind of sketchy, but you know what, I'll go with it, and hopefully they'll tell me within the second week. So with the Airbnb set up and the trial offer being started, I was actually going into the office, and the first day I was like, all right, this is pretty cool. You got like the Airrack sign on the wall, you've got like the world record plaques on this side, you got this whole kitchen area and stuff, this lounge area, and then you got the editing room on one side, and then further back you've got this sort of like photo studio music sort of area where they would actually have the producer's office where they would actually be scheduling Airrack's flights, people he'd collaborate with, respond to emails, do costume design, do set design, all that sort of stuff they were in charge of, and they would also do some filmmaking stuff too on the side. I think it was like 4 or 5 girls that were producers, and then on the editing team it was myself and like 5 other people, and it was cool to kind of see the whole setup. They had the sitting standing desks that were adjustable on the perimeter of the walls in the editing room, so we were all kind of facing toward the wall along this rectangular room, and it was actually kind of dark in there too, so we wouldn't have any glare of the sun coming through. So we each had our own Mac studio where we'd edit off of, and it would all connect to this giant server they had, which had a bunch of the footage and all the assets and stuff, and it would also keep our project files all organized. A lot of the things too that I recognized as well, they were all really organized in terms of the file structure, the naming of things, and also the color coding of different layers for their videos. So every project all started off with this template, which had the individual layers named for notes, for captions, for different overlays and stuff. And then the sound effects layers, they had a couple tracks for that. And they had music layers that are separate as well underneath that. So it'd all be organized for every single project moving forward. Another cool thing that I realized too was we weren't actually tackling a video individually. Since there was 5 of us, we would all be working on a segment inside the video, and half of us would be split up to work on the video for next week. So half of us would be working on the video that's coming out next week, that's the next video being posted, and then the other half of us would be working on the video for 2 weeks from now. So it'd sort of be a chain, and we would actually take over sometimes on other segments. So what was cool about the server, I can actually access any of the project files basically from any of the Mac Studio computers. So for example, if one of the guys needed help on a segment, I could load up his project, I can add the sound effects to his layers, it can update on his end, and then he can edit from there. So we were kind of hopping around several times, and I would actually send off my rough cut to this other editor. He would do sort of a polish from there. I would do some captions for another guy. I would do some sound effects for another segment. So we'd all kind of work on individual sort of segments, but each of us would be tackling multiple different parts of the video. So ultimately, I had like 3 different things in one of the videos that I was a part of. So I did the sound effects for one segment. I did the main sort of segment that I was in charge of initially, and then I did sort of polish for this other segment for another video. So it was kind of bouncing around a little bit, but it was cool because I got to work on sort of different parts of the videos. So a couple days went by, I got my parking pass, and I realized that since I didn't have any parking out front, that most of the guys parked out in the parking garage. That was walkable. Basically, we can walk from the parking garage to the office in like 2 minutes, so it's pretty convenient. I had my own Airrack themed parking card that I used to kind of scan in and then park my car, and then I would walk to the office. Around 9:15, I'd say, is when I got into the office most days. I asked them about their schedule and kind of how things work when people clock in, and there wasn't really a set schedule where it's a set shift that you would have. It is more kind of like when people show up, they show up, and they all kind of seem to show up around like 9:15, 9:30. Some people showed up a little bit later, but it depends kind of when you leave the office. So we were all kind of working 8 hours, but it was pretty flexible in terms of when you kind of showed up and when you left. And most people left around 6:30, I'd say. So it was like 9:15, 9:20, or 9:30 to 6:30. And we would also have like a lunch break as well in that time, but it was kind of flexible whenever you wanted to take it. It was kind of just making sure the video was done. So it depends on how efficient you are in terms of the editing. And there's always more help to be involved in the editing process when you're working on different segments. So it's kind of whenever you want to take a break, you can take a break, and it's pretty chill. I kind of like that because it wasn't really forced on when exactly we're allowed to take a break. We also had a couple meetings as well where we would sit down in this conference room. We would all talk about future videos, kind of what went well with the past video, how we can improve for next time, and also some feedback too. So in these meetings, we'd also talk to people who were actually remote working for us. So on top of the editing team, that was around 5 or 6 of us, we also had 2 remote people. So one of them was an assistant editor, and one of them was kind of like this freelance person who would do a lot of the graphic design and also the transitions sometimes too. And so we had one guy from India who would actually log into our computers remotely overnight using Parsec, which was like a remote software to access computers. Since we had all our stuff from the server, he would actually access the project file while we were asleep and be able to edit and add the overlays and graphic design, and also polish the video up if we were actually running behind. We had an assistant editor from Australia who would work on delivering sort of like the rough kind of selects, where we would take that and bring it into the rough cut stage. Now, what was interesting as well too, that I never really experienced before, was we were actually recording our own voiceovers for these videos. So a lot of the voiceovers you see in Airrack's videos, where he has his own voice, it would initially be our own script of what we'd create. So we'd type out our own script of what we wanted to say for this part of the video. We would actually record it with the microphones, and it was pretty interesting too, where all of a sudden, when you're working on a video in the editing room, you would hear someone else at their computer just randomly shouting this voice line. So we all had to do that for our own segments, and we had to record our own voice in the same tone that Airrack would use. So being excited and sort of telling that story. And it was pretty interesting too on how different the rough kind of cuts were compared to kind of how the video comes together in terms of the story. Now, I'm not going to say that everything was fake, but a lot of the storytelling, it really kind of stretches the truth and makes it more dramatic. It would always be like dramatic, because a lot of the footage was a lot less dramatic than kind of how we framed it. So a lot of these YouTubers and stuff, I don't fault them for it. TV does the same thing for a lot of the reality TV shows and stuff. They like to make different events in the video appear more like Oscar worthy and more dramatic, to have people watch through the entire video and wonder kind of what happened. Because in the real life footage, it may have been sort of like something that happened, but the way we actually drew it out and added the music and added sound effects and stuff kind of made it more of something that was like, oh, we gotta watch this, we gotta stay till the very end of the video. So that's one of the tactics that I realized that a bunch of YouTubers use when they're doing a lot of these challenge videos and stuff. They would really like to draw out these moments to make it more dramatic than it actually was. Sometimes too, the order of clips would actually be reversed. So sometimes we would put sort of different segments in different orders to have more of a flow throughout the entire video. So sometimes it was interesting, we would actually cut up this one segment that initially chronologically would be recorded later on in the day. We would actually just kind of splice it in earlier in the video to kind of make the story more interesting, more exciting. So as the weeks went on, I was doing more of the video segments and stuff, and it was actually going pretty smoothly. We were pumping out videos, and a couple videos actually hit number 1 and number 2 on trending as well. So it's kind of cool to see those videos kind of blowing up on YouTube. So around the third week or so, I was kind of wondering at this point, I was like, I hope they actually tell me soon, because I was waiting on the HR guy to send me like a message or actually see him in person. So the HR guy that actually onboarded me, he would be there maybe like a couple times a month, because he had other clients too, like Yes Theory and other YouTubers that were also in LA. So Airrack was one of his clients, and he was just there to kind of do the HR paperwork stuff and check in time to time. He had his own office in the Airrack studio, but he wasn't there that often. So I was kind of hoping that he would actually show up and tell me whether or not I'd be brought on full time. But it was kind of getting toward the end of the third week. So on the fourth week, I was kind of wondering at this point. We toured a bunch of apartments on the weekends when I wasn't working to kind of see what was out there, the price ranges too, the lease agreements and stuff. And unfortunately, the lowest lease agreement time frame was 6 months. So I was kind of hoping that I would get a clear answer whether or not I'd be hired full time or not. I was also kind of indecisive at this point too, because I got to see both the pros and cons of this job. The pros, it was pretty cool, pretty flexible, that I got to actually work for this YouTuber and be with people that were around my age, and we were all kind of getting along. On the cons, it was kind of repetitive in terms of the videos we were producing. It was also kind of the style of videos that I wasn't really used to. I kind of got used to it more over time, but it wasn't something that I realized I was going to tackle long term for my career, because these kind of videos are more tailored toward a younger audience. And for me personally, I like working on more cinematic, more storytelling videos that are maybe like more travel oriented compared to kind of Mr. Beast style of little kid videos. So there was both pros and cons of this job, and it was actually kind of cool to see both sides of it, because at first, the newness of this job was really exciting, and I thought I was going to stay here for a very long time. I was like, oh, this is great, this is awesome. And then as the weeks went on, slowly I realized the reality of the job. It kind of involved, weird hours. On one hand, it was kind of cool to be able to craft your own story, but other times too, it was kind of just too much in terms of kind of making things super dramatic, super over the top, and working on these videos that weren't really interesting to me. Because personally, I never really watched Airrack's videos. I never really tuned in to subscribe to his stuff, so it wasn't really a topic that really interested me 100% in the first place, and it wasn't something that I was like fanboying over, but it was cool to kind of see the behind the scenes of how things worked. Going to the end of the fourth week, on to the fifth week actually, there was actually 5 weeks in this trial compared to 4 in a month, because it was like from July 14th or 13th until August 15th. So the trial was actually a little bit more than a month, like 32 or 33 days. So on the fifth week is when I actually was wondering at this point if they forgot about whether or not they wanted to hire me full time or not. So one of the days actually, it was around 6:20. I was about to leave, but I wanted to do one last change, one last revision for this video. So I wanted to do one last voiceover that I had written down on my script on Google Docs. And when I went to open the Google Doc, all of a sudden it said I was signed out for my work account. So I was wondering, like, maybe I was inactive, that's why it signed me out on Google. But then all of a sudden when I was signed out, I was asking the other guy who was next to me, what happened? Like, I wonder why my account got signed out automatically. And that's when the HR guy and Jason told me if I wanted to chat, let's go to the conference room. So we went to the conference room, and they basically sat me down and said they don't want this meeting to be about anything specific in terms of anything that I did wrong or any sort of technical stuff in terms of what I can improve on. They would have a chat with me further on that specific stuff later on, but this chat would just be basically them saying they don't want to continue the trial, and also that they wish me the best of luck. So I was like, okay, like that seemed like kind of weird. They didn't want to tell me any specific stuff. They didn't have anything to tell me basically in terms of my performance. And they told me that that would be a separate chat. So with like 2 days left of my trial, which I wouldn't even be able to get a place to live, like an actual long-term apartment, if they even agreed to bring me on. And waiting that long to tell me a decision was kind of like unprofessional in terms of what I was thinking. So already I was ready to just say that I didn't want to accept a full-time offer just because of how long it took to make a decision. But also on their end, I understand too that if they told me they don't want to bring me on, it would not really be motivating for me to be able to come into work and continue tackling these videos. So they told me to hand in the parking pass and also the key card to get into the office. And basically I shook the guy's hand and said goodbye to the whole team. And that was pretty much it. So I walked out of there and the month was up for our Airbnb and we drove back to Northern California. So even to this day, I haven't heard anything. I haven't heard a word on their part in terms of anything specific on what I did good or what I can improve on. And personally, I think I did a pretty good job. I think I was able to actually help the videos be posted pretty much every single week. We were actually pumping out videos pretty quickly with my help. I was tackling a lot of the segments too. So I was helping some people who were actually out of town. People were on vacation too. I was kind of filling in and sort of being that person to be able to tackle those segments and kind of blend right into the rest of the team.
You can click the link in the description if you think you have what it takes.
So partially, I think that they never really had the intention of hiring someone full-time additionally on top of the contest winner, because if they told the contest winner after a month that he would be fired, there would basically be a lot of bad press for Airrack because he kind of came all the way from New York to come here for this contest that he won, and he was also guaranteed a full-time job. So for them to kind of say after the trial they don't want to bring him on, it would kind of really be bad on Airrack's part. But since mine was kind of like an additional position, it was sort of more okay for them to just to say after this trial, we're not going to pay you the full salary and basically thank you for the work of the 1 month, but that's it. So I think that they were kind of looking for someone just to kind of fill in for that month. But it was a cool experience regardless, and I got to see kind of behind the scenes of what YouTubers actually do. I got to meet Airrack himself. He was a really cool guy, and him and I actually had a couple conversations too. So we actually got to talk a little bit about how he started YouTube and kind of what he kind of did to blow up and gain all these subscribers and create these video ideas and stuff. And it was pretty cool to kind of learn from one of the best in the YouTube game. So that's pretty much it on my story on how I got to work for this guy, and sort of both the pros and cons of working on this job. So if anyone else is actually considering working for a YouTuber, maybe if it's not Airrack, it's someone else, these are actually some lessons that I hope that you learn from my experience. They may be different for yours since each person's different. So that was my experience working for Airrack. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to subscribe down below, click the like button, and I'll catch you guys next time. See ya.